Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. I have a bunch of books to talk to you about. So I've been reading a variety of books. I have tried to vary my reading lately, which I've always varied it because I like all different kinds of genres, but I've been varying it with, you know, I like historical fiction, and sometimes I'll read several historical fiction at a time, and I kind of binge that. Then I'll binge cozy mysteries or whatever. So I've been trying to be more thoughtful in switching it up from time to time, and I've really found that to be the most interesting, fun way for me to read. So the first book that I finished this past week was The Amazing Mrs. Pollyfax by Dorothy Gilman. This, I think, was published in 1970, and I love this series. I had never heard about it until one of you told me about this series, so thank you, because it's a hoot. Mrs. Pollyfax is as good as Miss Marple. Mrs. Marple, you know, is just this calm, cool, collected, observant woman, but this lady is just ready for an adventure. But she's an older lady, just like Miss Marple, and she's super smart. She uses her wits to save the day, and she works for the CIA, so it makes it fantastic. I think in this one she's in Turkey. I think that's where this one's set, and she is learning karate, so that makes it interesting. It was just a fun book, and I am loving the series. So again, thank you to whoever's told me about these books, because I love them. The next one I finished was Emily of New Moon by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I have meant to read this forever. I mean, literally for years. And finally, I decided to pick it up this year and use it for Serious About Series, the Serious About Series challenge that Elizabeth over at Lizzie Faye Loves Books, she has this challenge, and I've mentioned it several times, but I'm trying to participate in that by reading a bunch of different series and get some series finished. So I started the Emily of New Moon series. There are 3. This is a trilogy. There are 3 in this series, and I loved this too. This was a really good Lucy Maud Montgomery. This one reminds me of Anne a little bit, but for some reason, even though she's a child and she's, you know, it's the same kind of thing, a coming of age kind of story, it feels a little more grown up to me than Anne does for some reason. Like for a little bit of an older audience. Not that there's anything in it that, you know, anybody could read. It just feels a little more like that. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but it does to me. Leave some comments if you know what I'm talking about, and you can kind of convey it better than I am. But I did love Emily of New Moon. I enjoyed this one. In this story, it's about a young girl who, when her father dies, her mother has already died, but when her father dies, she's sent to live with her mother's relatives. And it's really sad. It's just like Lucy Maud Montgomery, the way that she tells a story, and these strange family members. She always has these very different kinds of family members in these households. But in these family members cast lots for her, so it's really kind of sad. It's kind of like, who is the unlucky one to get this child? So it's really sad, you know, at the beginning how they kind of push her off and, oh, well, I drew the shortest straw, so I have to take her kind of thing. So she moves in with these relatives at New Moon Farm, and the story goes from there, and it's a lot like how Anne of Green Gables is told, or Magic for Marigold, any of those stories, a coming of age. And the, you know, if you like Anne or Marigold for Magic from Marigold, you will probably love Emily too. It's that kind of story, and I love that. I'm all in for another story like that. Just the simplicity of growing up and dealing with your relatives and the people in your community and forming friendships. It's all of that. The difference in this one, though, that I think maybe this is why it feels a little bit older than Anne, is she has that same creativity and imagination that Anne does, but she seems like she's more determined about becoming a writer. It's like she knows she wants to be a writer from the get-go, and there's a lot more of that in here. And there's a lot more of dealing with grief in here too. Maybe that's part of it as well, because like after she loses her father, she begins to write him letters, and I found that to be just such a sweet process for her, in a way that she could grieve and deal with missing her father as well as her mother. So I thought that was an interesting part in this story too. So it does have a little bit of a serious tone. Maybe that's what I mean, a serious tone. It has a little more of a serious tone than the Anne books, but I highly recommend it. I thought it was great. If you enjoy Anne of Green Gables or Magic for Marigold, it reminded me of those books. So I did enjoy this one, and I will be picking up the next one. So then I read The Quilters Apprentice by Jennifer Chiaverini. This is the first in the Elm Creek Quilts series, and there are like 20, I think, in this series or more. I have wanted to read this for a long time, and when I go to Goodwill or thrift stores or something and find one of these books in this series, I always pick it up, but I had never found this one till several months ago, so I knew I needed to go and get started. But I did want to start at the beginning of the series, and I'm so glad I picked it up this weekend. I talked about this in my previous video. I'll leave a link in the cards if you're interested in that. But I did start it in a little vlog last week. I had a day that I could just spend reading, and it was raining outside. It was just a wonderful day to pick up books and read. So I did get a lot of it read that day, and then the next day I finished it up because it was that good of a read. I just couldn't put it down. It was really good. But this one is about a woman and her husband who moved to a town. Her husband has found a job there, and they have, you know, they don't have much money because they've both been out of work. So he gets a job there helping an elderly lady sell her estate. And it's an old Victorian mansion, so of course I loved that. The woman is just this grouchy, rough around the edges lady. So that made it interesting. And the wife and the elderly woman form a friendship because the elderly woman is a quilter, and she teaches the younger lady how to quilt. And there's also this relationship with the ladies, a quilting group in the community, and she befriends them, and it's just a beautiful story. And I will say, I was tearing up at the end of this one because it was so heartwarming by the end of it. I loved the history that was involved in this one. There is a lot of, as they're making the quilt, and that's what I love about quilts. I mean, I just think quilts are just so full of history and beauty. It's just a beautiful piece of art. But when you look at a quilt, a lot of people use all these scraps, and you think of fabrics of life and, you know, sewing the stories together. There's just so much symbolism in a quilt and what it represents. And you can see that in this book because as they are making the quilt, the elderly woman opens up about her past, and you learn all these things about her past and why she is living in the house by herself and what's happened, as well as her helping her come to terms with the young woman's relationship with her mother. So it's just a beautiful story of friendship and relationships and quilts. And I really enjoyed this one, so I can't wait to pick up the next one. I'm not sure if I need to read these in order, but I'm going to try to. If I can find the next one pretty soon, I'm going to try to read these in order. Let me know if you've read these in the comments. So the last one I finished was The Reckoning at Gossamer Pine by Jamie Jo Wright. This was really good. It's Christian fiction. It's Gothic suspense. I love Gothic suspense. It's one of my favorite things to read. This one had a dual timeline, and I don't always enjoy that, but I like both timelines in this one. The first story starts in 1907. That was my favorite because it was historical, and there were tent revivals, so I found that to be interesting. And it was about a girl who worked for her father at a newspaper. At the beginning of the story, she receives this obituary for a deacon in their church. And she knows him well, and so of course it concerns her because he's not dead. Only to find that when she goes to look for him, she finds his dead body. And so the story goes on from there, and as there are other things that start happening, other people are dying. She's receiving these obituaries hours before their deaths. And so she knows something's going on in this town. There's a sprinkling of these dark Edgar Allan Poe poems written in there too, so it's really spooky kind of. I mean, it's not scary, but it does have a spooky, you know, atmosphere to it. And then there is a modern day story with Annalise, who's just found out that this man who has died had all these pictures of her and records like he was stalking her. So that was pretty spooky too. And then these two stories tie together. And I don't want to spoil any of those things for you, but they do end up tying together. There's all these secrets of the past that come out in the modern day story. There's also a relationship between Annalise and a man who moves back into town, and that's one of the things that she's trying to work out within the story, and I found that to be very interesting too. I don't want to say too much about that because I would be giving away too much, but it is really a good story. It reminded me a lot of her other book, what was the name of that one? The House on Foster Hill. It reminds me a little bit. It's the same kind of feel to that one. The dual timeline. This guy lives in this trailer with all these secrets. Well, in the House on Foster Hill, there's a house with secrets. So it had some similarities, but it wasn't the same story, but it had a lot of the same kind of gothic elements that one had. I think I enjoyed this one better though than that Foster Hill one. So I will be picking up more Jamie Jo Wright. I did enjoy this one and I do recommend it. So those are the books I read this past week. Lots of variety in my reading. I'm excited about the stack that I have right now on my nightstand. Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.